Hello, everybody. Welcome. Get started in just a second here. Okay. Hi, everyone. Happy Friday. Thank you for joining us. My name is Jessica Coonan. I'm the Hudson Estuary Resilience Specialist with New York Sea Grant, located in Kingston, New York. And I will be moderating today's webinar with some technical assistance from Karen Palmieri and Nancy Jones. If you don't know, New York Sea Grant is a cooperative program of SUNY, Cornell, and NOAA, and is part of a national network of 34 university-based programs. Through extension, research, and education, New York Sea Grant promotes environmental sustainability, coastal community economic vitality, and citizen awareness and understanding about New York's marine and Great Lakes resources. So this webinar series is in response to feedback that we received from the launch of the New York Sea Grant Environmental Justice Mapping Tools Guide in fall of 2020, so about a year ago. And this guide brings together information about free online mapping tools that can be used to help investigate and define your local context. It's interdisciplinary, it's guided by environmental justice, and it highlights how mapping can be a resource for communities to approach environmental issues that matter to them. And so what we heard from that launch is that people really wanted to take a deeper dive into some of the tools. And we created this series so you can hear directly from the creators to take some time and to be able to ask questions. And one of the interesting things about this project is the range of people that are interested. Today, we have educators, community members, practitioners from across various fields, researchers, and several from state, county, and local government. So welcome, everybody. So this webinar is the first in a series of 3 that'll take place over the next 3 months. The tools that we chose to highlight focus specifically on combining environmental and climate data alongside demographic information. Today, we'll focus on environmental justice and the EPA's EJSCREEN tool. Next month, we'll be focusing on the Neighborhoods at Risk tool and how some of the concepts that we learn about today in terms of health and environmental disparities relate to climate change. And so I encourage you to register for that one as well if you haven't already. And then in December, we're going to learn about recent updates to a regional sea level rise mapper that also displays data from the Social Vulnerability Index. And that's one of the first widely used frameworks for considering demographic information and disaster risk. So those links are in the chat, and we'll be following up with that information via email in the coming weeks as well. So before I introduce our speakers today, I have a few housekeeping items. We're going to spend the first hour learning about environmental justice and kind of the basics of EJSCREEN. We'll take a few questions, then we'll have a break around the 1 hour mark. And then in the second half, we'll get a demonstration of the tool and take some more questions from the audience. Our speakers will be using Mentimeter for poll questions, so get ready for that interactive component. And then as we ask that you please submit questions to our speakers throughout the webinar by typing them into the Q&A box. The chat feature is also enabled for you to comment and interact with each other during the presentation. And if you type a question in the chat, we'll remind you to please enter it into the Q&A box. It just makes it easier for us to keep track of everything and less of a chance that we'll miss your question. So we'll also be recording today's webinar and making it available on the New York Sea Grant YouTube page under a playlist called EJ Mapping Tools. And that should be ready probably within the next week. So with that, I am so excited to introduce our speakers today, Towana Boutin and Lance Caldwell from EPA Region 2. So Towana has been with the US EPA for over 30 years. For 20 years, she had the opportunity to work under the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System program as an enforcement officer. She conducted over 100 wastewater compliance and enforcement sampling inspections in New York, New Jersey, and Puerto Rico combined. And in addition, she served as the Region 2's Discharge Monitoring Report Quality Assurance Coordinator. Towana is currently the Environmental Justice Coordinator for Region 2. Her primary focus is to increase one's level of knowledge on environmental justice and EJSCREEN. Towana has a master's degree in environmental studies from New Jersey Institute of Technology, and when she's not working, she enjoys spending time with her family. And then Lance Caldwell, he works in EPA Region 2 Strategic Programs Office and supports several of the programs there, including community engagement and environmental justice in New York, New Jersey, and the US Caribbean. Lance is the regional person of contact for the EJSCREEN tool, helping EPA staff and community partners use the tool and co-leading EJSCREEN trainings alongside Towana. Lance has a master's degree in environmental science and conservation from Antioch University. And so with that, I will hand it over to you all.
All right, welcome everyone. All right, thank you for having me. Let me share my screen. Start. All right, and is my screen sharing?
Not yet for me.
Yeah.
Okay, give me 1 second. Let's see. Back to Zoom. Okay. And is it sharing now?
Now I can see it.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
All right, so welcome everyone to our EJSCREEN tool training. And again, my name is Towana Boutin, Region 2's EJ and Children's Environmental Health Coordinator.
Oh, Towana, it looks like we're seeing your notes.
Not sure how to change the view. See all slides? Nope, that's not it.
Oops.
Sorry. So give me 1 second. Let's see. Not sure which.
Looks like if you go to display settings at the top of the screen, it looks like you can change it there maybe.
Okay. Sorry, everyone.
No problem.
View the slideshow.
Yeah, try that one.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Okay. So just to give you an overview of our agenda, as was previously mentioned, we're going to start off with a poll question of what does EJ mean to you? Then we're going to give a brief synopsis of what is EJ, the history of EJ, and what is the EJ community. And we're going to watch a short video on identifying communities with environmental justice concerns. Then we'll take a brief break. We didn't put the poll question in for EJSCREEN because we figured some may not have that background knowledge. So then I'll turn it over to Lance to do EJSCREEN introduction and demonstration of the tool. So the first part, if you can take out your cell phones or not sure how you can access through the internet, or however it's easy for you if you go to menti.com and you type in the code 565-34815. And because I can't see all the participants, not sure if there's anyone on the phone, but I'll repeat that code again, 565-34815. And then at the end of this session, I'll present the results. So what does environmental justice mean to you? So the background. how did we get there? So in 1992, the Office of Equity was formed at EPA. Then in 1994, President Bill Clinton signed the Executive Order 12898. And in 1994, from the Office of Equity, it turned into the Office of Environmental Justice. And just recently, President Biden signed an Executive Order 13985, 14008, 13990. And 13985 was advancing racial equity, support and equity. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And 14008 was tackling the climate crisis and at home and abroad. And then Executive Order 13990 is protecting public health and the environment and restoring science to tackling the climate crisis. So EPA, each region, region meaning city, state, and federal, have different definitions of environmental justice, but the EPA defines environmental justice as the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all peoples, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respects to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. So the Executive Order 13985, just to elaborate a little bit, it's an executive order on advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities through the federal government, meaning all of the government approach is to equity, not completely EJ, but there's a significant overlap. And definitely having significant public engagement, because you have to start from the bottom up to address this issue of EJ. So if you have a lot of public engagement, you can help design these laws to fix the concern. So now I'd like to turn it over to Ameesha.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ameesha Mehta-Sampath. I'm the team lead on EJ. So the executive order on tackling the climate crisis at home and abroad, it's Executive Order 14008. So what does it highlight? It highlights that this mandate for Justice 40, many of you might have heard some information about it. And what is Justice 40? It's 40% of the resources of certain programs to benefit disadvantaged or underserved communities. It also mandates the development and implementation of an EJ scorecard, which is the communication and tracking tool developed by the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council that will track that these investments and benefits are actually occurring in the communities that are disproportionately impacted by different stressors and are underserved, marginalized, etc. And it also mandates significant public engagement.
Thank you. So what is an EJ community? So you may have heard the term EJ community, but that's just a short way of saying it. It's really communities with EJ concerns. It's where people who live, work, play, pray in the most polluted environments are commonly people of color, indigenous, and low income. These communities suffer from disproportionate impacts from interactions of 4 categories of stress: environment, health, economic, and social. These impacts are often the result of generations of systemic racism and disinvestment, lack of meaningful public participation. And this is why we want to engage the public so that this can start to change. And the communities that have poor access to information. So we say a community with EJ concern as opposed to EJ community, because we let the community self-identify if they are considered, if they would like to consider themselves as an EJ community. So now I'm going to show a short video, and I think I have to stop. And give me 1 second and pull this over into the screen. And is my screen still sharing?
It is, yep.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. This.
There's a few things I want to share about some of the basic.
Sounds good.
Hi, I'm Matthew Towana. I'm the Director of Environmental Justice at EPA. And there's a few things I want to share about some of the basic terms and the ways that we refer to communities in the environmental justice program that I want to share with everyone. There's so many folks working on EJ, asking questions about EJ, trying to figure out how to integrate environmental justice into all of our programs, policies, and activities right now. It's really important that we understand and use these terms consistently and knowing why there's some differences in what we do. One of the things that's really important are just a couple of the standard ways that we refer to communities with EJ concerns. One of them is people of color, low income, and indigenous communities. And it's really important to hit all three of those terms when you're referring to communities in this way. This goes back to the 1980s and early 1990s of the environmental justice movement. It's the way to make sure when you're talking about EJ, you're being inclusive of all the communities that the environmental justice movement defined as being part of EJ. So again, people of color, low income, and indigenous. The other way to talk about communities with EJ concerns is to say communities with EJ concerns. A lot of times folks will say EJ communities. It's a shorthand, it's easy, but it's also somewhat misleading. We don't actually define EJ communities. We don't draw borders around certain places, and we don't label them as being EJ or not EJ. Instead, we say communities with EJ concerns. And there's a reason for that. In EPA, we believe that communities define themselves. It actually, again, goes back to the beginning of the EJ through the EJ movement. One of the principal rules of environmental justice is communities speak for themselves. And as part of speaking for themselves, they define themselves. They define what their community is, they define where their community is, and they define how we should refer to their communities. Now, in some of the executive orders now, we're actually going to start to take some important steps forward where the United States government and EPA will start drawing borders around certain communities and labeling them as disadvantaged. That has been put in those executive orders with a lot of input from environmental justice leaders and communities across the United States for very specific purposes that are really exciting and really important. So if you're doing work in those places related to something like an executive order where we're going to define disadvantaged communities for EJ purposes, great. Use the tools that are going to be created to do that. Participate in the conversations related to that. But outside of those spaces, it's still really important to be careful about how we refer to or label any of the communities. So again, people of color, low income, or indigenous communities, or communities with EJ concerns are always the safest bets for those. There's a few ways that we have to actually determine which communities might have EJ concerns. One of those, of course, is just by engaging with the community. The community is always going to be your best resource for understanding how the community views itself, what sorts of concerns the community might have, and whether they think they have environmental justice issues or not. It's always the best place to start. Another way to go, though, if you can't engage directly with the community given the circumstance, is to go ask some of the staff here at EPA that have knowledge about what's going on in communities. Of course, the EJ staff that are in every region, every program, especially regions, though, that are on the front line of a lot of our relationships directly with communities, they'll be able to help you understand where are the EJ issues, what are the EJ issues, and how does the community relate to those issues? Some other staff are like the community involvement coordinators in the Superfund program, do a lot of work and have a lot of knowledge and understanding of environmental justice. There are resources there to you. please don't fail to use them. Don't feel like you can't go and ask your colleagues about how to understand communities with EJ concerns. Another way is to do some historical or analytical research. There's a lot of demographic tools out there, a lot of historical tools, especially now where there's a lot of academic research looking into things like redlining, looking more into the treatment of indigenous peoples throughout the entire history, way before the founding of the United States. That research can help inform you about which communities might have EJ concerns and what those concerns are. And then, of course, we also have EJSCREEN. EJSCREEN is the nationally consistent screening tool for environmental justice that we use at EPA and that we've made available for everyone across all of the United States. Real quickly, the best way to use EJSCREEN, just very basically to understand if a community has EJ concerns or not, is to look at the EJ indexes. There's 11 EJ indexes because we use 11 data sets within EJSCREEN. And in the EJ indexes, we take each of those 11 data sets and we combine them individually with the people of color and low-income information for every block group in the entire United States. And that gives you an EJ index. If you're looking at a community and any one of those 11 EJ indexes are at the 80th percentile or higher, that's a pretty good starting point to say, hey, there might be some EJ concerns in this community. Let's dig further. EJSCREEN, though, like its name says, is just a screen. It's not giving you a yes/no answer. It's not giving it in black and white. It's giving you a lot of information, though, to start doing some research, asking better questions, pursuing a more informed investigation, or reaching out to those folks that live in that area and figuring out how they view their own community and what their issues are. Something else that's really important to understand are the differences between some of these basic terms like equality, equity, and justice. Equality, of course, is one of the bedrock principles of the United States that all people are created equal and so are all communities. But we know that in practice that is not true. There are a lot of inequities and injustices in the United States. So equity is a term that recognizes that not everything is equal and that the reasons for that are really important and that we should be doing things about that. But in equity is different from justice because in equity, typically in the EJ program, what we mean is we're trying to figure out how to close the gap in those inequitable situations. Some communities have been left behind. So what can we do to try to do something more for the communities so they can be brought up to the same place as everyone else? So an equities policy or an equity intervention would be like looking at a grant program and making some extra considerations in there so that the grant resources are allocated to the communities that need them the most. That would be an equity intervention. That would be doing something equitable in our policies or programs or activities. And that's really important. We have got to do things for equity to try to close those gaps. It's not everything, though. When the Office of Environmental Justice was originally founded, it was actually called the Office of Environmental Equity, and the EJ movement, which was responsible for EPA really taking up environmental justice in the early 90s, said, thank you, that's great. We love that you have an Office of Environmental Equity, but that's not what we were talking about. We were talking about justice. EPA, you need to pursue environmental justice, not just equity. Justice recognizes that there are inequitable outcomes across the United States, but there are reasons why those inequitable outcomes exist. And a lot of those reasons have to do with statutes, with policies, with decisions about things like resources throughout the entire history of the United States and way before the United States was founded. And figuring out what those reasons are for the inequity or the injustice and then doing something about the reason, that's practicing justice. So it's different from equity, okay? Equity is trying to close the gap. Justice is about finding the reason for the gap and doing something about that reason. All right, so it's important to have both, but you've got to be able to focus on both equity and justice. And justice is really the longer term thing, right? We could do equity all day long, but if we haven't solved the justice issue, we're still going to have a gap in the future. Of course, there's a lot of resources here to help you understand these things. We have resources on the SharePoint site. We have videos from our EJ and Systemic Racism series. We're creating more videos to help folks understand the roots of environmental injustices in the United States and a lot of other elements to try to help not just EJ program staff, but everyone across the EPA be more informed and better practitioners of environmental justice. So go to those SharePoint sites and use those resources. We also have a lot of stuff out there on how to use EJScreen. There's a lot of training resources on the EJScreen website, and there are people throughout all of the programs and regions that are skilled practitioners of using EJScreen who are ready to help you understand how to do it. We would love it if everyone in the EPA understood how to use EJScreen and understood how to use EJScreen in their program policies, in their activities, in the implementation of EPA's regulatory endeavors. And then, of course, we also have EJ coordinators everywhere throughout the EPA. It is part of the reason why we exist, to help you. We are here to support the integration of EJ in everything that you do. It doesn't matter if you work on disaster recovery or sending out DERA grants. It doesn't matter if you're issuing pesticide permits or writing rules for the air shop. We are here to help you figure out how to do environmental justice. Please do not fail to reach out to us. Again, my name is Matthew Tejada. If you can't find your EJ coordinator, you can email or call me directly and I will put you in touch with them. We want to help you do environmental justice so that we can advance EJ across the United States.
All right, so let me just get back to the PowerPoint. Here. All right, and my screen is still sharing, correct?
Yep, it says key takeaways.
Okay, perfect. So let me just view display. And I saw we had some questions in the chat box. Maybe we can address a couple of questions.
Sure. So our first question that we have is about the EPA's definition of environmental justice, asking whether it's adequate, noting that the definition is many years old, and will the EPA be updating its definition?
Yes, we do recognize that this was established a while ago, a long time ago, and currently there is a work group to update that definition and to incorporate President Biden's some of President Biden's wording into that definition. And Ameesha, I'm not sure if there's something else I may have missed as far as the updated definition.
I think you got it. I think you got it. Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in and add a little bit there too. I mean, that's a really good question and so important. And you could probably kind of see that. So that was Matt Tejada, the director of the Environmental Justice Office for all of EPA, and kind of the way that he described environmental justice is kind of different than this big definition. And so that there is, as Towana mentioned, there is a vibrant conversation going on right now, looking at the definition, how, what is adequate, what will actually serve justice.
And,
Yeah.
okay, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead if you have more to add.
Yeah, no, I was saying, and definitely like they have the fair treatment, meaningful involvement. And as Matt mentioned about the word equity, and the part about the injustice part. So yes, they are working on updating this definition.
Great. And then we had one other question come in, and I believe it's referring to one of the new policies, but is that 40% of the investments benefit, is it that 40% of the investments benefit disadvantaged communities, or is it that 40% of the benefits flow to disadvantaged communities?
I'll let Ameesha.
It's 40% of benefits will go to benefit disadvantaged communities.
Great, thank you. And that's all we have for questions at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Just advance the slide. Okay. All right, so key takeaways. EJ is not something intangible and did not happen by accident. It is everyone's responsibility to seek equity and justice. If you wait until you need to gauge communities, then you are already too late. So we at the EPA, we recognize that and working on that part. The impact community might not be where you think it is. And this is why you hear in EJSCREEN that the EJSCREEN tool is just a starting point to ask more informative questions, but being in the community and asking them what they, because they're the ones that's going to self-identify. So you ask them what are their concerns. That's a starting point in addition to the EJSCREEN analysis. So EJ practice and requirements are only going to be more defined and rigorous. There is every reason to start changing business practices right now. Communities have the right to influence what happens in their communities, and some industries will never be desirable. Utilities must be real partners, not just neighbors. Support local health, economics, and environmental quality and education. There are tools, people, and practices to help you on your justice journey, environmental justice journey. All right, so let me pull up the poll results over here. And thank you for participating in this. So how this works, we have voices heard, equal distribution, equity, community, hope, change, environmental benefits, disproportionate effects, healthy environment. So if you notice, I forgot what it's called again, Lance, this type of Menti
word cloud.
Yes, that's it, word cloud. So the reason why equity stands out the most, because in your responses, we got more responses on equity, and then it looks like community is the next one, where we got more responses in that. So we have other addressing overburden, change. So this is all great. So just wanted to share that with you, and thank you all for participating. So let me just close this out and get back to the PowerPoint. All right, so we addressed the questions, and so I'll turn it over to Lance. And let me just wait, Lance, before you start, let me just make this bigger and change the view. And get back to the slide. Right. Okay. All right, Lance.
Thank you. I saw some questions already in the chat on EJSCREEN, and the one from Jeffrey I really like, but we'll definitely get to those at some point. Some of those I'll probably be able to answer while I'm kind of talking about the tool. But as Towana mentioned, so EJSCREEN is a mapping and screening tool that was designed by EPA and implemented, and it's a way of, again, screening for environmental justice issues. And one thing that disclaimer that's pretty important, I think, one thing that we like to say is that, EPA doesn't designate locations as EJ areas. And just like Matt Tejada said in that video, I really like that video. Just like he said in there, first of all, EPA is not in the business of pointing to one community and saying you're an EJ community and pointing to another and saying that you're not. It really has to do with how the community identifies. And so what does EPA use EJSCREEN for? We use it, only for screening and as a starting point to dig deeper into areas of concern. So what is it? It's again, it's EPA's web-based GIS tool for nationally consistent EJ screening and mapping. And it combines environmental and demographic data to highlight where vulnerable populations may be disproportionately impacted by environmental factors. So some of the key features of EJSCREEN, there are 11 EJ indexes, and we'll talk a little bit about what that actually means, one for each of the 11 environmental indicators. It's annually updated with the environmental data. And thanks, Jeffrey, I'm getting the live feedback from the chat. It's annually updated and sometimes more than annually. With the new updates to the environmental indicators. And I'll talk about this a little bit, just the way that data is shared. There's a few years lag time for some of them. Some of it's last year's data, some of it's a little bit before. So it's always something to consider when using it. It's annually updated for the demographics as well. And we get the demographic information from the US Census Bureau ACS report. It's at the highest resolution data available, which is the census block group. The census block group is the smallest geographic area that the US Census Bureau publishes their sample data. So that's what we use. And that's about 600 to 3,000 people in each group. And you can see at the right of the slide, those shapes, the funny looking shapes. Each of those is a census block group with about 600 to 3,000 people in each one. You can download the data. I'll talk about this a little bit later, but if you know how to use GIS or other mapping tools, you can download these layers that show the inequities, and you can combine them with other maps that you have or other data layers or mapping layers that you have to help look at cumulative impacts and disproportionate effects. And it's accessible, it's easy to use. It's designed to be very user-friendly. Here's a list of the environmental indicators and the demographic indicators. So as you can see, the 11 on the left, a lot of them have to do with air, and several of them have to do with proximity. And then the demographic indicators include people of color population, low income, linguistically isolated. That's the number of households that all of the adults in the household on the survey, on the census report, said that they do not speak English, quote, very well. And so it doesn't matter what language that they're speaking, but it's a good thing to look at on a map for folks who may be left out on things that are only spread in English. It has education and it has age groups. And so a little bit about the EJ index I'll talk about now. What EJ index is a combination of the demographic data and the environmental data. So what the demographic data uses is a thing called demographic index. And that's literally just the people of color population times the low income population to become one value. So it's weighted 50% people of color, weighted 50% low income, and it's called the demographic index. And that is multiplied by the environmental indicator. And those two combine to become the EJ index. I'll talk about it a little bit more when we do the demonstration. So I'm going to go on. So some of the benefits, there's social benefits that you can help a community identify their potential vulnerabilities. Environmental and land use information, you can help determine if a community may be considered overburdened. A lot of that is helpful when communities are writing grants to anyone, but especially EPA, especially federal agencies, because they can say that, you know, we used your tool to see that, you know, we're having these disparities here. The health information, so it may help identify communities' potential vulnerabilities in conjunction with demographic information. So of course, EJSCREEN has a lot of caveats and limitations, and this is true for all screening tools, all mapping tools. First of all, a lot of the indicators are mostly screening level proxies for actual exposure or risk. And I'll talk about that again a little bit more in the demonstration. They vary in vintage. I mentioned that before, that some are from last year, some are from a few years ago, just because that's the availability. It takes a few years for the data to be processed and published. EJScreen does not cover all environmental or EJ issues. I wish we could put, 1,000 indicators on there, but EJScreen is constrained by the fact that it only uses environmental indicators that have national consistencies across all US census block groups. And it has to come from the same source too, which is tricky when you have a country like the United States, where all the different 50 states, a lot of times they'll sample differently and use different measurements, different methods. And so EJScreen only uses data that was collected using the same methodologies and across all groups. Census data has limitations and can obscure small communities. That's true for census data in general. Results should be verified on the ground when possible, and EJScreen does not identify EJ communities, as mentioned before. So just a little snippet at some of the way that Towana, Ameesha, and I have used EJScreen in action. There was a federal agency that was doing a project in the Kilvan Coal. Those of you who are familiar with New York City and New Jersey harbor area will recognize this map. So we used EJScreen, and I drew that funky shape on there, and I'll show you how to do that. That funky shape is the dredging, where the plan for the project was to dredge along that Kilvan Coal. And so we were able to draw a shape. It was exactly where they were dredging. And I was able to put I think it's a 1 kilometer buffer around that to see, who are the folks that are living within 1 kilometer of this dredging, who are going to be impacted by air quality issues that are associated with, who are going to be impacted by noise that are caused by this. And those little black squares with the flags, those are schools, and the green areas, those are public housing. Both areas are definitely areas of concern that already have to deal with other factors. So with this, we were able to dig deeper into some of the communities that would be impacted by this project. And we were able to pick up on some things that the original agency that had put out the environmental assessment missed. So we were able to see that, this is very close to this school that's already dealing with these things. This is very close to this community that's already dealing with all these other impacts. And that's just an example of some of the ways that we've used it. Some of this will make a little bit more sense during the demonstration. Another way that you can use EJScreen, as I mentioned, that you can download the data. And so in this situation, they downloaded the redlining map for a city. And with that, they could overlay the redlining map, where, in 1938, where certain neighborhoods were literally blocked off because the people that lived there were Black. And then others were marked off and they weren't, and Black people that tried to apply for these areas, they were, through a variety of methods, not allowed. And you can see that these things that happened about a century ago, those same areas that were redlined, that were blocked out for certain people, now 100 years later, they're having higher rates of all these different health impacts and higher rates of environmental issues going on. And you can use EJScreen data to the mapping layers to really see that.
So we can take a few questions.
Okay, so we have a question in the chat that asks, is there a plan in the future to connect environmental data, demographic data with health outcomes like cancer and asthma rates?
Hi, this is Ameesha. So yes, there is. So EJScreen currently has limited health data. It has a very robust demographic indicators as well as environmental indicators. For the next few versions, we are looking to expand that and include more health indicators in there. So then you'll have the opportunity to even look at the next version, or maybe a couple of versions down the road, that would actually look at identifying or giving areas a cumulative score, cumulative impact score. But again, these are discussions that are happening at EPA. We're not there yet.
Okay. We have another question. Is EJScreen currently used for specific projects? For example, do you use EJ screening and analysis in Superfund sites?
So as it was mentioned in the video with Matt Tejada, the answer to that question is yes. We have, what is it, CICs, Community Involvement Coordinators. They do, I guess once they, I forget how, was it, Ameesha, the Superfund site, the list? I forgot that, I'm not sure if that's
The NPL, the
Yes.
National Priority List, yes.
And when they're going to a community, they use EJ screen analysis to get a starting point on for a discussion part of it. So when they get to the community, they can have some idea of what's going on.
And I can just add to that, you know, EPA over the years has been utilizing EJScreen. And one of the things that is different with this administration compared to others is it's the priority to ensure systematic EJ integration, EJ analysis and integration across all of EPA programs. We're not there yet. Some programs are doing more of it than others, and some regions are doing it more of it than others. But the goal is to really make sure that this is consistent, systematic across all the programs.
Okay. And then we have a question. How does TRI, or the Toxic Release Inventory, work with EJScreen?
That I'm not familiar with. Maybe you are, not sure, Ameesha.
Lance, do you want to talk about that, or?
Yeah, I see that. I see that Danielle in the chat. Thank you for that. Answered it to a degree, and I can kind of expand on it, especially during the demonstration later. But one of the indicators is proximity to waste hazard, and I think that would be included in that indicator.
Okay. And then I wasn't sure if you were going to get to Jeffrey's question in the second half, but he was curious about what your top 5 indicators would be, or that inform EJScreen.
Yeah, I think when the best time, maybe Towana, if you go back to the, you mind going back to the slide with all the environmental indicators? We can talk about that now. Yeah, some time.
Okay, just waiting for it to come back. Let's see. PowerPoint and go back. Okay, now it's moving.
Yeah, so in the chat, so it was mentioned that there's 11 data sets that inform EJScreen. If you're to add additional indicators, what would be your top 5? That's a really good question, and something that a lot of working groups within EPA have been working together to decide what they want to add. One thing that's noticeably absent on the list of environmental indicators is water related, especially drinking water. I don't know if that'll ever be possible because of the issue that I was talking about, that I think it has to do, there's not a lot of nationally consistent data layers for drinking water, things related to that, but that would definitely be one of my top ones if I could add one. Another one is proximity to green space, which I really think is extremely important to both mental and physical health. EPA's other tool called Enviro Atlas does proximity to green space. I think it's another issue that proximity to green space, it's measured differently, I think, depending on the city that you're in. So that may be another one that EJScreen may never have because of that. I can't think of, those are two that come immediately to mind is drinking water issues and proximity to green space. I don't know if Towana or Ameesha, you'll have something. Ameesha works in the health sector mostly, so I assume that Ameesha has some health indicators that you'd like to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, this is going to be in the updates. They're looking at life expectancy. They're looking at potentially low birth weight, certainly asthma and blood lead levels might be one area. So again, there's a lot of discussion on it. So the advantage, right, of EJScreen is that even though it may not seem as comprehensive with respect to the indicators, because you have the availability to access other sites and bring in layers, and Lance is going to talk more about that, it becomes sort of unlimited as, what sort of data sets that you can bring in and expand your universe of looking at the different indicators, etc. So that's really one of the greatest advantage of EJScreen.
And my top three, it depends on what we're using the EJScreen for, EJScreen analysis for. So like if we're reviewing a NEPA project or something, and depending on if it's the infrastructure that they're doing was like the Vankill that Lance showed a over screen of. My concern there was, as he mentioned, the proximity to schools. We look at noise factors and things like that. Other projects with bridges, when it comes as being the Children's Environmental Health Coordinator as well. We look at, so if you're taking things down or anything that would affect children and maybe children with asthma, where their asthma would be exacerbated. So I look at air, and again, depending on the project, lead. So those three, the noise, air, and lead would be my top three.
I see in the chat that oh, I just lost it. Anyway, but yeah, cooling center deserts is a really big one. One feature that has been talked about in some of the work groups that have been present on is including heat as one of the factors. You have urban heating effect that disproportionately affects certain people by their race and their income. I know that I live in New York City, and we had that heat wave a couple of months ago, and you could definitely see, like, both it has to do with the proximity or access to these cooling centers, but also back to green space, how many trees are in the area, because trees provide so much cooling effect just on their own. And so by looking at proximity to green space, you could probably also look at heat as a factor for injustice.
Great, thank you. And I think we have time for just one last quick question before we take a quick break. And I think this is probably for Lance. It sounds like Sebastian's very interested in the potential for a drinking water layer in EJScreen. And so do you know, has it been thought through who would be responsible for the creation and the maintenance of that layer? If that would be EPA, USGS, or a combination?
So EPA has a working group that focus solely on this EJScreen tool and incorporating, if there's going to be new indicators incorporated. They work on all the updates and ideas for moving forward with EJScreen. So it would be EPA at the headquarters level that would make decisions on that kind of thing. This probably isn't the most satisfactory answer, but as far as I know, the issue would be that they're having trouble finding a nationally consistent data set to use. I can look up more on this if you don't know if it was in the question, if I have the contact for Sebastian, but I can reach out individually to Sebastian or anyone else that's interested too. You can let me know. You can send me an email or contact me somehow, and I can send you more information on the water.
Great. Yeah, I can connect you with Sebastian afterwards for sure. Okay, so how are you guys doing? Do you want to take a break now and then resume around 2? Does that sound good, Towana and Lance and Ameesha?
It works for me. And when we get back, we'll have the demonstration for the EJSCREEN tool.
Okay,
Yes,
great.
thank you.
Okay, great. And it looks like 10 minutes, so maybe 2:05.
Yeah, sorry.
No problem. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll be back shortly. Get up and stretch and get a drink or something. Now. And I have one more question and then I'll save the other one for the demonstration. But will the EPA provide assistance for smaller, more rural states to help prevent overburdening? Interested in how to integrate cumulative impacts and permitting would be helpful. And if you have any other ideas or strategies.
We can have Ameesha answer that one.
Or Jessica, I'm sorry, I missed part of the conversation. I heard cumulative impacts.
Yeah, so Carrie's interested in, first of all, will the EPA provide assistance for smaller, more rural states to help prevent overburdening? And then she's also asking how to integrate cumulative impacts in permitting. That would be helpful. And any other ideas or strategies?
Yes, so the question to number one, your first question, yes. EPA, with our Office of Environmental Justice, including the regional offices, are working to develop specific strategies that we can use to strengthen our outreach and efforts in our rural and insular areas. And the second aspect is, you know, New Jersey DEP has issued a new regulation that talks about that any new permit, not an existing permit, but new permit will require cumulative impacts assessment to be done. So at the moment, EPA with some of our state experts and others are developing the process that we can, we hope to share, you know, hopefully in the next 6 months or so with our other stakeholders on sort of a best practices document on how to incorporate cumulative impact analysis, not only in permitting, but other purposes like rulemaking or voluntary programs or resource allocation, etc.
Great, thank you, Ameesha. And I think we're good to continue with the presentation.
Great. So I'll give a 20-minute, 30-minute demonstration of the tool. And after it, we'll open it up for questions. Any questions that are related to the tool, I can just continue. I can zoom, I can go to anywhere in the country on this map. And let me share this. And so I can answer it, in a practical sense. And then obviously the three of us, Towana, Ameesha, and I, were open to general questions about environmental justice and about EJSCREEN. Sure, I'm sharing the right thing. Okay. So here we are. Let me stop sharing my video. I've got a dual screen, so you'll just be looking at the side of my head if I leave my video on. Here we go. This is probably a familiar part of the country to a lot of y'all on the call. We have Newburgh and PMC here. So I'll just start going through some of the really basic features for now. So one of the things you can do is select a location. And if you remember before, when I selected a location, I selected a whole canal, a whole pathway. But a really basic way that you can draw a site is it's just one point. And this would be interesting or useful if you were looking at a facility and you wanted to know about the people living a mile buffer around a facility. So let's say that something's going on right here. I don't even know this part, but something's going on right here. You've selected it, and now you can put the buffer. Let's say we want to do a mile. So we add it to the map, and now we're going to be looking at that mile around that area. Another way that you can select is to draw a polygon, and you can do it any shape. For whatever reason, if you wanted to draw a polygon of just around this complex here on the south side of this highway, you could do it. And now you've got the same thing, it's just a funky shape right here. And the reason why you'd want to make these shapes, and obviously the way that I made that shape before along the canal is I did a little more exact and tedious than this, but I just kind of drew around here. So let's say there is a project that's going on in the river here. You want to know who's living within a mile from it. You could draw this shape here and then put the mile radius around that shape, and it's going to show everything that's within a mile from the riverbanks here. Now, some of the other things you can do here is you can add features. And that's how I got on that other map that I showed, the schools and the public housing. So you have all these things. The sites are reporting to EPA. This is really interesting if you want to know Superfund sites, brownfields, water discharges, toxic release. So these are all the Superfund sites that you have. So you can see something there. And if you click on it, then you can get some more information on the Superfund site. Just a little bit about that. Well, first of all, it's kind of usually when you use this tool, if your internet is decent, it'll go really quickly. But because I'm sharing my screen for a live Zoom call, it's a little bit clunky. Some of the other features, as I mentioned, schools, prisons, public housing. One of the new ones that they've added is climate, which is equal parts interesting and equal parts terrifying. So I suggest not doing it for too long without some mental health exercises in between. But here you can look at the first feature is coastal flood hazard. This just shows all the areas that have the hazards, and then obviously the darker areas have more hazards here. You can have the 100-year floodplain. So it's kind of hard to see, but you could look, and whether you're the area that you're looking at or your own house, you can see if NOAA, FEMA consider this in the 100-year floodplain. So this is really useful if you're looking at a community and they're dealing with all these other factors. You can use this layer to see they're dealing with all these other factors, and the likelihood that they're going to have to deal with a huge flooding event in the near future is very high. And those of you that are following climate science know that the 100-year flood it doesn't happen every 100 years. Sometimes it happens a lot sooner than that. And I think someone in the chat mentioned climate justice, but these layers can really show where climate justice and racial justice and environmental justice, where they all intersect. And then here's the really scary one, the sea level rise. We can go over to the coast here.
And before you switch, Lance, there's a question asking, is that NOAA's coastal flood hazard layer?
Yeah, before I speak out of turn, let me make sure. So that's the nice thing about the tool is all of the environmental indicators and everything. You just click on one of these, the little information icon, and it'll give you background information on this. There's also some pages that have a little bit more. This one's a little bit hard to follow, but I just got to find where the source is. I don't know if anyone's finding it quicker than me. I believe that it's all from NOAA, all three of those climate indicators. Anyway, it's either NOAA or FEMA, but I'm pretty sure it's NOAA. The sea level rise is definitely NOAA.
It's NOAA.
Okay, thanks for that, Ameesha. Confirmation.
And just a quick, something for you to integrate in the Q&A. There is a question from Christina saying, since it's a GIS-based application, could we download maps with indicators selected for use in presentations?
Nice. Okay.
And then a question from Supriya, can you import a boundary?
Oh, yeah, that's also a really good question. It is possible. Let me do this right quick while I have this open, and then I'll address those two right here. Just while I have it open, you can do the sea level rise, and this area shows when the sea is 6 feet higher, what areas will then be underwater for the foreseeable future. Also very good to know if you're working with the community, knowing that at some, if you're working, again, if they have all these other cumulative impacts, the knowledge that in the estimated future, they may be victims of, climate change, and maybe climate refugees having to move out, having to change how they live on the land. All these things would be helpful to know. So first, for inputting other layers, you can add shape files, and that would bring in either from an online database or from your own computer. You could bring in any shapefile, any mapping layer that you want to overlay onto this map. And it'll make a little more sense why you'd want to do that once I get to the EJ index layer map. So you can do it that way. Just a reminder, this is an online web tool, and it's designed to be quick and easy to understand and easy to use. And so its capacity to bring in things is a little bit less. If you have the capacity, if you have like ArcGIS or another program like that, it's a little more effective to download the EJSCREEN data, which you can do from the EJSCREEN site, and then upload that into your ArcGIS platform and then combine it with any layer. And you can do things like what I showed before with the redlining map. If you have that for your city, you could overlay that layer. You could overlay anything. You could overlay all the things that were mentioned in the chat for for heat index, for I saw a food island issues, or food desert, not food island, food desert issues. You could combine any of those with these EJ indexes, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Did I address everything that you brought up, Ameesha?
I believe so, but
if not,
perhaps.
Yeah, if not, y'all can bring it up at the end, and I can show.
Yeah, so one of the last questions was about boundaries. Can you bring it?
Oh, if you can include a boundary. That is something that I've never tried to do, I don't think so, because I did not mean to do that. Because I've wanted to do that before and I couldn't figure it out. I will write a note to double check on that, but I'm pretty sure that you cannot. I think that you have to, well, that's not true. That's not true. Apologies. If you have a, if you have boundaries for something, let's, that you created with another platform like ArcGIS or something, you can import it. And then within those boundaries, you can make a report.
I found the question. Yeah, it asks, can you import a boundary?
Yes, and I think it would be in the add shapefile feature to do that. But instead of a shapefile, it would be the boundary. At the worst, you would just have to, and this is what we've had to do before, you just have to draw it, which can sometimes be tedious. Fortunately, with drawing it, you can also save your session. Now and before, it's been updated that this feature for saving your session is a lot better. Sometimes it would save it in a weird way before, but now it's some of the bugs have been sprayed. Anyway, so now that we have the features, again, a lot of things we look at are schools, and because a lot of these projects that we look at would impact school children more, especially children who are spending a significant amount of their day inside of a school building. So there's all the layers here. Now let's get to really what makes EJSCREEN interesting, because all this information that I've talked about, it's all publicly accessible. You can get it on other platforms. All the environmental indicators, they're all from publicly accessible sources. All the demographic indicators, they're all from the census. But what EJSCREEN does that's novel is it combines those two. So let's go ahead and make some maps. So we're looking at environmental indicators. Let's look at lead paint indicator. What lead paint is, I'm going to use this one because it's kind of simple to grasp, because, and it's a good example of a proxy. When we put this on the map, what it's measuring is not actually how many houses have dangerous levels of lead paint in their house. That's really what we want to know and what we're trying to look at, but there's no way that we can know that because no one's ever done that study, because it's such an intensive study to do. So what this really is you can see when you hover over it, is this is the percent of housing that's built before 1960. So this is just in this dark red area. That means that in this area, the amount of houses that were built before 1960, which very likely have lead paint in them and would cause troubles with families that are living in there, it's in the 95th to 100th percentile. And that was a good time to talk about percentiles compared to percentages. And it's worth talking about because we don't use percentiles very often in common talk, I guess. So percentile is different than percentage. Percentage is an actual number, an actual measurement of something, per 100. But a percentile is a relative term, and it's relative to the scores of some of the other things that you're measuring. So I guess one way to talk about it is, if all of us on here, if we all took a test and we all absolutely bombed it, we all did terrible, but you got a 60%, so you got a D. Even though that's a really bad score, if everyone else got an F, then relative to everybody else, your score is the highest. So it's in the highest percentile. So you might be in the 99th, there's no such thing as 100% percentile, but you would be in the top percentile for scores, even though you did terrible, but that's just because all the other scores were so low. So percentile is different than percentage. So when this is looking at the percent of housing built before 1960, it doesn't mean that 95 to 100% of houses in this area were built before 1960. What it means is that the number of houses, the percentage of houses, when compared to the rest of the country, is in the 95th to 100 percentile, meaning that compared to the rest of the block groups in the whole country, it's higher than 95% of the rest of the country that are dealing with this issue. So this is the environmental indicator. Demographic indicator, as I mentioned, you can look at people of color, population, low income, and then you can look at the demographic index, which is a combination of those two. And it says it right here, the demographic, and I'm pointing at my screen with my finger as though you can see it. But the demographic index with the combination of percent low income and percent minority. So the demographic will combine those two into one feature. So it's looking at not the number of people of color, not the number of low income people, but where do those two intersect? Where's the highest amount of people that are both? And then the EJ index combines all three of the things that we talked about. It combines, you can pick any of these environmental indicators. We'll go back to lead paint. It combines the lead paint indicator, so the percentage of houses, with the percentile of that compared to the rest of the country, and the demographic index, so the people of color and the low income. And here is the layer with the EJ index compared to the United States for lead paint indicator. So what is this measuring? This is showing that in these dark red areas, that the people who live in these areas are disproportionately impacted based on their race and based on their income level by lead paint in their houses and having to deal with issues around lead at a greater rate than 95 to 100% of the rest of the block groups in the country. So that's what EJSCREEN is measuring. That's the novel part of EJSCREEN, is really seeing where these disparities that are based on race and income are happening. So we can also look at other areas. We can look at any of these indicators. We can look at diesel particulate matter level in the air. Again, we're looking at the EJ index. You can look at areas around here. I'll go up to, I did a report earlier in Albany. So let's make a report. So right now, we're looking at diesel PM particulate matter in Albany. And let's say we want to select a location. It doesn't really matter if you have a layer going. If you make a report, it's going to report on all 11 indicators. So let's say that something's going on. You're working at Albany, something's going on here. And you want to know all the people that are living in a half-mile radius around this area. So some of the features that you can do, you can go to Explore Reports. And this is a really quick way of looking at all the environmental indicators without having to cycle through all the different layers like I was doing before. So this is a quick look. This is just the environmental indicator. Remember, that doesn't consider demographics. And then demographics, and this is the EJ index that considers both environmental and demographic. So you can see that to varying degrees, and when you highlight over one, it shows the number. If you remember that Matt Tejada on the video, EPA has decided on a number that's kind of a trigger for us to say that this is really a significant environmental justice. It warrants significant investigation into these things. And the number is 80. And so anything that's above the 80th percentile, yeah, it's kind of like a huge red flag for us to really look at those areas. But honestly, everything that's above 50, which of course 50 in a percentile would be the national median, anything above 50 is going to be worth looking at. Presence of anything is going to be worth looking at, but especially if it's above 50, especially if it's above 80. So the most used report that we can do is this Get Printable Standard report. And because I knew that it would drag with the internet quality, I went ahead and did it earlier before this. So if you click on this Get Printable Standard report, you're going to get this. And it's just a more detailed version of that little mini graph that came up. And here you can see all the numbers laid out. Again, we have these set of numbers are all above 80. So we would definitely trigger us to look deeper into the issues and do some more investigation. Here's our area that we included, and at the top you can see that it's a 0.79 square miles area with about 5,800 people in it. You scroll down and it has tables with all the environmental indicators, the demographic indicators, everything laid out. And this is something that you can, save as a PDF. And let's say that you're writing in for an environmental justice grant from EPA. You can look at the area that you're writing the grant for, the community. You could make this, save it as a PDF, and include it, attach it to the application, and that would kind of show, if you're doing it with your EPA or you're doing it for someone else, you could say, look, we used EPA's tool, and it's showing that folks here are dealing with proximity to hazard waste sites at a higher rate than 90% of the rest of the country. This is something that really needs to be looked at, and that would get, someone's attention. The other factor that's used a lot is this ACS report, the American Community Survey. So that's the US Census Bureau census report. This one's really interesting in community engagement. So here again, we have the population, and then we have a breakdown of the race in the area. We have a breakdown of the sex, the age, the education level. And here is something that we use probably the most on these reports is the language. And so if you're doing community outreach, you want to make sure that you're speaking the same language as the people that you're talking to. You don't want to leave anybody out by speaking a different language. And so this is a breakdown of the households that, how well they speak English. And this final page is a breakdown further of all the different languages that are represented in that area, and then the number of households and the percentage that makes up. So in this area that I've just selected, completely subjectively, I don't know much about Albany. I just clicked on the area. But in this area with about 5,000 people, 86% speak English primarily in the household, and 8% speak Spanish. So you would definitely want to include any community outreach for the area in English and Spanish. There's a few other languages represented, including this one that says other Asian. So it's an Asian language that's not mentioned above here. So if you're doing an outreach in that area, especially depending on exactly where within that area, you would want to do some further investigation into what language that is that people are speaking. So I think that's mostly what I have for the demonstration at this point. So once you select your location and you explore the maps and you create the reports, it's up to you to decide how you want to use the information to better consider environmental justice in your work. Just a reminder that EJSCREEN is not designated to answer questions. It's not the final step. It's the first step. It's to help you ask better questions about a community. And I don't know what your first impressions are of it, but EJSCREEN again is designed to be user-friendly. It's designed for someone who doesn't have experience in ArcGIS or other things like that. It's supposed to be intuitive. It's supposed to be something that you can click around and kind of figure out on your own. We might mention this at the end, but I am always available. Towana is always available. Ameesha is always available. If you have any questions, if you're working through this tool in your work for environmental justice, you can always reach out, and you're come across something that you're stumbled on, and the resources online on the EJSCREEN site aren't helpful, you can email us and we can definitely help out.
All right, so I have some questions. I'm not sure if it was actually answered or not, but I'll just read them off to you. Okay, someone answered the PCB question already. In addition to combination utility, are there overlay possibilities? I'm not sure what you were showing at the time. I just clicked onto this area. So maybe, Charles, you can, I don't know if your question was answered. And then I'm going over to the Q&A. And it says, will you be giving more examples of how this tool is used by different organizations? So during this presentation, we don't have examples, but I can say for when we review NEPA, we do NEPA reviews, they do use EJSCREEN, and they'll put what they found, and then we'll do even, I guess you say, deeper dive into things, as Lance had mentioned about the Caldwell, am I saying it right? Caldwell.
Yeah.
Sorry, project. There were some things that they didn't incorporate. So after we did our deeper dive, we brought those things to their attention. Okay, and then we have, oh, okay, Andrew put, yikes, I just clicked on the school I work at and looked at the printable, and every single category is above the, oh wow, 80th percentile.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, when you're using this stuff, be sure to take some mental health breaks, because some of it can be really disheartening. Not to try not to be too much of that. It's also can be empowering, because now that you know, and now that you have almost kind of like evidence of that, you can work to making it better.
Hey, Lance, can you show us how, I believe there's a function in here where you can download a map once you kind of get it all set up on your screen to print and download. Can you show us that feature?
Yeah, so up here on the print, and that's kind of what I used when I had that. It looked like a screenshot, but it was really a print. You could, what's doing right now? Let's say you're in Albany and you're wanting to look at the diesel PM for environmental index. You're wanting to show this to somebody. So here we have it, and then you can hit that print. Name it. Oops. And then export it, and I think it'll bring up another window that you won't be able to see. But that's basically how you would print a map, and it would turn it into PDF format, as you can see here, or I guess any picture format that you want, and then it'll download to your computer, and you can use that for an application or to show somebody else, whatever you're using it for.
That's great. Thank you. I know we had a question about using them in presentations, so that's a really great feature. I'm also seeing a really useful comment in the chat. Danielle says it's a lot of information, but it may be a quick way to gauge what we may need to be concerned about. Their team designs buildings in New York City and Westchester, and this kind of information can help us to grasp the larger picture about site-specific conditions. And the visual can be very powerful for convincing building owners to invest in mitigation of some of these risks. So I know a lot of people on the line are trying to understand how they can use this tool in their work. So does that sound like a good way to use it? I'm not sure exactly what Danielle does, but yeah. Yeah, and Ameesha says, yeah, you got it.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, there are caveats with any mapping. I mean, any mapping tool, like Google Maps has huge list of caveats, and especially like screening tools like this, when you're including data layers from multiple sources, you obviously have those. But like you said, like with a map, there's something so powerful about just showing something like that. There's something so powerful about seeing your own school or your own house in an area, that it just hits you different than if you saw it written in a report or something. So maps are really powerful, and so I agree that's a really good way to use this, and to help inform. Well, it shouldn't be the sole basis for a decision to put something somewhere or do a project somewhere. This is definitely a great first step, and definitely a great addition to the set of tools that could be used to identify an area that you want to do a housing project or something else in.
Right. And then I'm curious, what's the best way that people can understand some of the caveats about specific indicators? Like, how can we find out when certain indicators, the last time they were updated, and what the data source is?
Yeah, on the EJScreen site, there's a page in the section on that. I can throw that in the chat right now. Give me a little bit.
We've got another question here. Where can we learn more about what each of the indices measure? Example, what is RMP?
Yeah, so that would be in the same area that would be in this link that I'm about to send, which kind of gives a deeper, better explanation of each of the environmental indicators, both on their source, their caveats, and involved with them. Yeah.
Would that be the technical documentation?
It is in there in detail. There's also a web page that has a more brief. In the technical documentation, it goes into greater detail. There's a page that has a more brief version, so both can be looked at. Do you have that up? Is that what you asked?
Yeah, this is Ameesha. Lance, I have it up, so maybe I can do a share screen and just.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
Can folks see it?
Nope, not yet.
No? I have the.
So Ameesha, for our version of Zoom, on the bottom right-hand side, even though you press share.
Oh, yeah, yes, I see.
Yeah.
What about now?
Yep, we can see it.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so if you look at the link, it says epa.gov EJScreen overview of environmental indicators EJScreen, and Lance or I can put that in the chat. But this is the list of environmental indicators from air to traffic proximity to dust, lead paint. And you can see where the dust, lead paint information is from the American Census, American also Community Survey. You talked about what somebody asked about RMP, that's proximity to risk management plan. So that's waste, air, water. Count of RMP, potential chemical accident management plan, facilities within 5 kilometers or nearest one beyond 5 kilometers, each divided by distance in kilometers. Proximity to hazardous waste facilities, proximity to national priorities list. This is where the Superfund sites, wastewater discharge indicator, etc.
Excellent, thank you.
And just to add, like Ameesha just showed the NADA data as 2014, which is the National Air Toxic Assessment data. That the reason why it says 2014 is because it comes out because it's national data and it comes out every, I think, 6 to 7 years. So the latest is, even though I believe 2018 was just released, like we don't have like exact dates of when they're released, that would be found on the website that Lance is going to post the link for. So right now, when they do the update for EJScreen with all the data, I think that for us, as I remember, it comes out in January, February, or it will be coming out in January, February. It should have the 2018 NADA data release.
Great. And we have another question in the Q&A. So these are obviously federal tools, national data sets, but do you envision them being useful as New York implements its Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act? Since the CLCPA, it mandates a significant focus on environmental justice. And I think I'll take a first crack at this. We do in New York have a climate justice working group that is working on creating a tool specific to New York State, I believe. And I'll put the link to that in the chat so you can follow along on the progress on that. I think it'll be open for public comment soon. But do any of y'all have anything to add to that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I saw something similar to that earlier, and I had forgotten to address it too. But EPA, again, one of the constraints of EJSCREEN is the need to only use data that are nationally consistent. And obviously there's so many things that states, will measure in different ways. And so considering that, there are a set of environmental indicators that a state itself could produce and have their own environmental justice screening tool that's state specific, that they could use those layers that are from the whole state. And also that EPA is excited about and is actively encouraging states and local areas to make their own mapping tools that are similar to EJSCREEN, or that will at least do a similar thing. And I think that they're also open to assisting both with using EJSCREEN as a model, but also technical assistance as states. I know that California has a really nice state system, and I've also heard about New York's development of theirs. But that will be helpful if you're wanting to look at even smaller areas and even more environmental indicators that you wouldn't get to on EJSCREEN. It would be really helpful if your state had its own map. You wouldn't be able to compare it to the rest of the country, but you'd be able to look across the state and see priority areas that way.
The advantage lands, sorry, Jessica.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Lands, right, is through EJSCREEN, we're able, if a state has its tool, or there are publicly available and vetted environmental health data portals that exist, and we know they're pretty robust for New Jersey, they're pretty robust for New York State, as well as New York City. So EJSCREEN allows you to bring those map layers in. And, that's another way to sort of collectively access different data sets and tools to give a much more clear picture of the area that you're focused on.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I know one other source for New York. I'm not sure if Jeffrey Herder is still on, but he put a link in the chat a little earlier. He works for the Department of State, and they're also working on a tool to display this information. Oh, he's here. Alongside some other New York specific data sets. So if you save the chat and scroll up, and we'll do a follow-up email with all the links to everyone after this call. I'm not seeing any more questions. I'll check the chat really quick one last time. But yeah, if do either of any of you have any parting thoughts? I know that we're so appreciative for you to take the time to speak to us today about environmental justice and this tool. And getting to interact with EPA Region 2 is a huge opportunity. So thank you so much.
If I can start with Jessica, I want to say thank you for inviting us. And I want to thank everyone for all their awesome questions. It helps keep us on our toes and, being prepared to answer questions. And one of all the questions were great, but something that came up was about how others use EJSCREEN. And that's something I'm thinking about now to include in future presentations when we do stuff like this. So thank you for your questions.
Great.
And if maybe, because I see people are leaving, if you can post the
Oh,
the
yes. the
survey.
evaluation.
Mhm.
I'll put the evaluation in the chat. This is really helpful for everyone with their programming. So if you could fill this out, that would be great. And then we'll also include it in our follow-up email. But thanks everyone for joining us today. And I hope you have a great Friday and a great start to the weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, it says link not found.
Uh-oh.
Try that again.
Let's see. I cut and paste. Copy. Let me see if I can put it in. Control V and go enter.